The year is 1605, and a group of English Catholics are planning to assassinate King James I and blow up the House of Lords. Why? Well, because they don't like his religious policies. They're part of a conspiracy known as the Gunpowder Plot. But thankfully for James, it'll be foiled before it has a chance to ignite. Nevertheless, its impact will still be felt for centuries. Hi, I'm your host, and this is Fire of Learning, the series that brings you the craziest and most important stories from human history. This is the story of the Gunpowder Plot and its consequences. After years of struggle, in 1558, England had finally broken free from the rule of Mary Tudor, the last of the two children of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. Now ruled by the Protestant Queen Elizabeth I, England had also broken free from the Catholic Church, establishing itself as a Protestant nation. For Catholics, like the citizens of our story, life under Elizabeth was tough. Sure, their faith hadn't been outlawed, but they were certainly made to feel like second-class citizens. But the new regime was lenient compared to the persecutions under Mary. So many Catholics continued practicing their religion in secret, praying in underground churches, hiding priests in attics, and sending their kids to Catholic schools in neighboring countries. That was the situation when the citizens of our story came together in 1605 to hatch a plot that would change the course of history. There were about 30 conspirators in all, mostly English Catholics, with some sympathetic Protestants thrown in. Their leader was Robert Catesby, who grew up around the persecuted English Catholics and saw firsthand the damage done by the regime. He wanted revenge. His co-conspirator, Thomas Winter, echoed these sentiments. Winter lost his office in the royal household under Elizabeth because he refused to convert to Protestantism, and then there was the ever-drunk and ever-fickle Guy Fawkes, whose military career was going nowhere fast. All men of action, they decided to carry out an attack against the king and the House of Lords in order to depose the government and replace it with one more favorable to Catholics. Specifically, they planned to blow up the House of Lords while the Parliament was in session during the opening of the next session on November. This wasn't so hard to pull off since Parliament only convened once a year, and November was right around the corner. Their plan was simple. One of the conspirators, Thomas Percy, rented a house near Parliament and filled it with explosives. Then another conspirator, Robert Catesby, got jobs working at Parliament so he could sneak in and lay barrels of gunpowder near the House of Lords. There was just one problem. A local citizen noticed something strange. Barrels of gunpowder left near a building where people gathered for prayer. On October, he alerted the authorities and an investigation was launched. On November, a search party arrived at Percy's house to investigate, and among them was the man who would become famous for foiling the plot, Sir Thomas Bridges. As they searched the premises, the conspirators were tipped off by one of their own, and so when the search party entered the basement, they found Guy Fawkes guarding over 36 barrels of gunpowder. In his hand was a red-hot musket ball. He claimed to have been using it to light candles, but we'll let you decide what to believe. Fawkes was immediately arrested, as were several other conspirators. More than 200 people were arrested in the following days. The charges against them, high treason. Since they intended to kill the king and depose the government, their punishment was swift and brutal. Several men were executed, including Fawkes, whose head and heart were cut off and displayed around London as a warning to other would-be traitors. Many others fled England, and those who stayed behind had to live the rest of their lives in fear of the long arm of the law. But why? What was so terrible about the Gunpowder Plot that caused such harsh penalties? After all, no one was killed or injured. Well, it's because the conspirators didn't fail by much. It could very well have worked. If not for that pesky search party, the plot would have succeeded, and England would have descended into chaos. The country wouldn't have blown itself up, so to speak, but it could have come close. In fact, in the immediate aftermath of the discovery of the plot, England did descend into chaos. People were afraid there might be a Catholic uprising. Anti-Catholic riots broke out and property was destroyed, so the authorities took extreme measures to restore order. One of those measures was to increase the severity of the laws against Catholics. Before the Gunpowder Plot, Catholics had the right to vote and hold public office, even though they weren't allowed to practice their religion openly. But after the plot, these privileges were taken away. They were also banned from sending their kids to school in neighboring countries and forbidden from assembling in large groups. The penalties for priests found to be living in England were increased, and people suspected of being Catholic were subjected to intense surveillance. In fact, this anti-Catholic hysteria would continue for decades, even after the reign of James III ended and his son Charles III took the throne. By 1649, Charles I was executed and England was in the midst of a civil war, but the anti-Catholic sentiment remained strong enough for Parliament to pass the Uniformity in Religion Act, which compelled everyone in England to attend the Church of England. Those who refused faced fines, imprisonment, and even banishment. It would be another century before religious toleration was restored in England, and Catholics were allowed to practice their religion without fear of persecution. Meanwhile, the anniversary of the Gunpowder Plot became a major royalist holiday, celebrated annually on November with bonfires and fireworks. Children would reenact the foiling of the plot, burning effigies of the conspirators. One of these figures was always named Guy, in honor of Guy Fawkes, and sometimes they would burn a figure representing the king as well. These celebrations would continue for centuries and inspired the modern holiday of Guy Fawkes Day, which is still celebrated in Britain today. The Gunpowder Plot also helped to reinforce the identity of English Protestants. According to historians, after the plot, English Protestants began to refer to themselves as non-Catholics, thus creating an us versus them mentality. It also contributed to the notion of political unity among Protestants, since opposition to the perceived Catholic threat rallied many of them together. So in addition to intensifying discrimination against Catholics, the foiling of the Gunpowder Plot also created further divisions between religious groups in England, which probably wasn't what James I had in mind when he narrowly escaped certain death. Now, if you want to learn more about the effects of the Gunpowder Plot, check out the links in the description below, and while you're at it, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Special thanks to our supporters who make episodes like this one possible, and to everyone else, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.